an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows, Season 1, Episode 3, Werewolf Feud. In this episode, we meet the werewolves and we also meet Evie, an emotional vampire that begins to work at the same office as... Somebody help me out. I haven't recorded on this show in a month. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Oh, Colin Robinson. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to Stephanie for commissioning this episode. What's up, Stephanie, if you're out there? I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that another episode of this show has been commissioned in July, Season 1, Episode 4. And beyond that, I have not got any more commissions for this show. So just keep your eye on that, guys, because if it goes for too long, I do have to cancel it because I can't go so long without watching. And be able to keep the names straight in my head, as we can see. Just, how long was it since the one before this? March 30th, exactly 1 month. Yeah, so makes sense. So just wanted to let you all know. And thank you again, Stephanie, for commissioning this one. I actually watched this episode for the first time like 3 weeks ago because Owen really wanted to see it. And he was so bummed that I wasn't going to get to record on it for a while, so he wouldn't be allowed to watch the next one. And I rewatched it today, and I was really surprised that on the rewatch, there were so many like small jokes that I missed the first time around. And for me, that's always a sign of an extremely well-written comedy, is when there are so many jokes that you're in the midst of laughing at the last joke when someone does the next joke, and then you miss it because you're laughing over it. And that definitely happened in this one a lot. So just the whole, the whole thing with werewolves and vampires, it's actually kind of fascinating to me the way that this goes, because it's always set up that, the werewolves are the blue-collar supernatural creatures and vampires are the elegant, high-class, usually it's written as, they're the elite. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, this can be shown in a way that's unfortunate. For example, the vampires being played by a lot of white actors, whereas the werewolves are played by a lot of actors of color. And so it begins to kind of look like the savages are the ones that are the animals, And I've always been sort of fascinated by that dynamic because it's an unconscious thing in a lot of cases, I think, but it's certainly prevalent enough that we all know those are the sort of stereotypes for each of the creatures. When you think vampire, you think somebody who is cold and remote and aloof, but has sudden blood rage urges and, probably has a lot of money and a great deal of education because they've been alive for such a long time. And then when you think werewolf, the typical thing is blue jeans and a torn plaid shirt with the fury of the howling as they transform under the full moon, and there's no control over their transformation or their instincts once they have transformed. And this show chooses to engage with both of those things in a way that I found actually really funny. They address, first of all, there have been a couple of small references in this show to Twilight. That there is one that I had forgotten to bring up, but on the rewatch I noticed it and I was like, I can't believe I forgot to mention this. Is it... Oh my God, guys. See, I'm forgetting everybody's names. I want to say Lando, but that's Lando Calrissian from Help me out, guys. Help me out with names. I remember Nadja because she was mentioned by Joanne in a comment from before I recorded. But what is the other one, Nadja's boyfriend? Laszlo. Thank you, Kyle. I combined their names, kind of. In I think the very first episode, we see Nadja following that guy that she keeps thinking is the reincarnation of a guy that she was in love with. He's hundreds of years ago. And there's this music playing. And then we cut to Laszlo on a harpsichord or something. And he says, I call that Nadja's theme, which is a direct reference to Bella's theme in Twilight. And I don't know why I found that so funny. I always sort of enjoy the joke that there seems to be music playing in a scene that is, I don't remember if it's Dianetic or dietetic, but it's basically meant to be that's music that was put in during editing. And then the camera will pull back and it turns out there's a guy sitting right there who's got a guitar in his lap and he's actually playing in the scene. I always find that joke really funny. One of my favorite versions of it is on Community, and there's this wild saxophone music playing, and then eventually you see a dude who's rocking out way too hard on the saxophone, and it's just what's happening? But yeah, Nadja's theme, that joke pays off so well because it pops up whenever she's on screen, and I really enjoyed that. So I just wanted to mention it. But the other reference to Twilight is them talking about whether all of the werewolves are actually at first Indian. And a guy's like, well, my father is from India, but I don't even think that's the kind of Indian that you mean. And there's a big conversation about all of them and their various ethnicities. And this episode is really funny. So first we start off getting a tour from Laszlo of his topiary garden. And I really love there's a couple of things going on here. First, he has a whole section of his garden that's dedicated to the vulvas of his favorite prostitutes and women he has known and admired in his life. Which, I have to say, one, I do appreciate that he calls them vulvas instead of vaginas. I really don't get my, what do they call it? My nose out of joint when people call a vulva a vagina. I understand what they mean. I understand how, it doesn't bother me. But I do appreciate the precision when vulva is used. I just have to acknowledge that. And, the ongoing joke of them having destroyed his mother's vulva because that gets, and Nadja being yeah, you made it look like his sister's vulva. Oh my God. It's such a crude, stupid joke. And I still really found it so funny. But the other thing that I love so much is that there's this guy who lives next door to him named Sean, who is on the front steps, and he's frequently brought up here as the guy who, he's just, first of all, inconveniently placed to see things that are going on that they don't want noticed. So that's annoying. And then he is just obviously not a great dude. At one point he says something about how, this bitch kicked me out again. Can you believe that? He's hanging out. It's he doesn't have a key to get in. Bitch kicked me out again. Can you believe it? She ought to strangle you to death with your own sphincter muscle. What did you just say? I said something which you will heartily agree with. Yeah, I hear that, bro. That's messed up. Oh my God. And then Laszlo turns to the camera and says his wife will probably kill him. Honestly, I am super duper here for this toxic dude who the very dangerous vampire who lives next door is fully aware is toxic and whom he despises. And I really I gotta say, guys, you ever engage in these daydreams of somebody really getting theirs? It would be so cool if Laszlo could hypnotize him into being a better person, My instinct, honestly, is really to be like, it would be so cool if Laszlo would just kill him. And then this woman could get, his life insurance money or whatever. But, I mean, if we're going to be merciful, and if he already has hypnotizing powers, Laszlo could hypnotize him to be a good partner who cares about his girlfriend / wife, whatever. That'd be great. And part of me just wants to, I was saying this to Miles when we were covering Twilight, that it always bothers me in stories when there are these beings with access to these crazy resources and they just don't really do anything with them other than stay hidden and living their very small but luxurious lives. Like, you have all of these supernatural abilities and you're not out there paying to fix the pipes in Flint or donating insane amounts of money to schools that are in districts that don't get any tax money. So if I had the ability to hypnotize people, do you know how many people out there I would have hypnotized? And look, I understand that you're overriding somebody's free will, and I do, in theory, have a problem with that. But if you are a person who's hurting people, I really don't feel bad about changing the way that you think. Sorry, don't hurt people, and I won't feel like this. It's just Anyway. So he eventually comes across one of his topiaries that he can smell the werewolf piss on it and gets really annoyed. And he goes down into the basement where he has a bunch of werewolf traps. And eventually they do catch one. However, before we get to them catching one, we talk to Colin. Am I a morning person? That would be an enthusiastic yes. I really enjoy the mornings. Let's see what Nandor's up to. And he goes over to Nandor's his bedroom and his coffin, and he just starts knocking things around, pounding on the top of his casket, and says as he leaves, I call that my morning cup of coffee. I don't think that I had previously understood how Colin feeds specifically on the energy of frustration. Because I called him an emotional vampire in previous episodes without realizing that that was a very specific other thing. And so I just thought it was, in general, when he said I feed on people's energy can be generated via a lot of different methods. So I just kind of thought it wouldn't matter, that as long as people were feeling a great deal in whatever moment, that he would be able to feed off of that. But when he says specifically frustration, I was like, okay, that really explains a lot of the way that he behaves. Because there's no reason to be specifically irritating if you can feed on any particular type of energy. And seeing that it's frustration is just, there's something so much more obnoxious about that. Oh my God. So we see him go to the office and he's feeding on everybody, talking about the Q-tip debate that we've been having, yada, yada, yada. And eventually he sees this woman come in. And he says, oh, there's someone new. If you get them before this place grinds them down, you get so much fresh energy. So he walks over. I really love the way that he manages to get to her, because you see him try and squeeze through this, these panels from the cubicles, and he has to go around. He's so eager to get to her that he's just trying to worm his way through. It's so awkward. So eventually he comes over. Let me be the ad hoc welcoming committee. And he does this guys, this is what I mean when I say that there are tiny jokes that I missed. I missed this the first time. He says, let me be the ad hoc welcoming committee. And he holds his hand out, but he doesn't hold his hand out vertically the way that you hold your hand out when you want to shake someone's hand. he holds his hand out very limply, the way that a woman would who expects you to kiss her hand. And I don't know if y'all have run into somebody who does this, but they like act like they want to shake hands, but then they don't do the handshake. And it is extremely off-putting. It's like, it's such a beautiful little character moment showing how every aspect of the way he behaves is designed to make somebody go, what? Why are you doing this? Just, it's not important, you know, but it's certainly, I have run into people who do this and I'm just like, why even hold your hand out? What are you inviting this interaction for? If you clearly don't want to like actually have the interaction. And he says, I'm sure you'll be hearing more about me. And she says, oh, probably not. And he says, what? People talk. And she says, not to me, they don't. Personalized nameplate, huh? Yeah, because people don't usually remember my name. Since we're on friendly terms, let me give you a little advice. The water fountain, I have reason to believe, is not filtered. I wouldn't dare go by the water fountain. What if everybody laughed? Why would they do that? This is so good, you guys. So I can't remember the actress's name. I've definitely seen her in a million things. But it turns out this woman is an emotional vampire, and it takes him a second to figure out what's going on because he's trying to get some energy off her and he isn't getting anything. And he goes back to his own cubicle and he's like stumbling and kind of like acting weirdly. And it takes me a second to be like, oh my God, she drained him a little bit. Look at him. She pulled something out of him. And he's watching her over there and he says, I think there is something weird about Evie. And eventually he comes to the conclusion because she's crying when somebody walks away from her desk. But when she turns back around, she's smiling. And he's like, I think she is an emotional vampire. And he realizes that instead of feeding off the frustration of people around them for energy, they feed off of pity. Look at her. There's not going to be anything left when she's done with Dave. I'll tell you that much. This whole damn office is empty. And Evie, E-V, emotional, oh, hell. I love this so much, you guys. So I talked, I think, on this show about emotional vampires and people that can be like this. And I don't mean like this, like Evie. I'll get to that in a second. But people who do leave you feeling incredibly drained and take a lot of labor. And there are times where that feels like justified because they're going through something. And they have been going through something for a little while and it's, you know, an extended thing. But you understand this isn't how they always are. They're just going through a really difficult period. And that can last for a few years, you know. But then there are people who are just like that all the time. My grandmother is always who I think of when I hear the words of emotional vampire. My grandmother was just, it was relentless. And I didn't see her often. So I was able to withstand it and also joke about it and make it more bearable for everyone by referencing it while it was happening sometimes, which she would get a little annoyed about, but I think it did help. But I know that my mother had to see my grandmother so much more frequently, and it would really like grind her down. Evie, though, she's got a different thing going on. Evie is... Have you guys met an Evie before? Somebody who they've always got some new drama happening to the point that you're almost like, is this real? Is she making this up? And as we, you know, Evie is making it all up. He says something about how she's gone through like 4 sets of grandparents since she started working there. Evidently nobody's keeping count. But this is the sort of thing that I do think people would keep count if it were reality. Because people aren't generous when it comes to pity. It's something that I think it's an unfortunately human trait, but a lot of people can be very suspicious when they hear a sob story. And I know personally that, and I'm going to give an example that's like, look, it's going to make me look like a bit of an asshole. I accept this. And this told me a lot about myself when it happened. When I was working at, I think it was like Homewood Suites by Marriott, and it was these sort of hotel rooms that acted as a small efficiency apartment. They came with a very small stovetop and mini fridge, and basically like a little kitchenette area. And due to that, they were usually used for long-term stays. People who were traveling for business but needed to be there for a couple of weeks and they couldn't afford to just eat out every day. And they were where folks who had good home insurance would be put up if something happened to their home. I was working there not very long, and so I wasn't aware of that aspect of our clientele. And there was this family that moved in, and then another family right after them, like same day, maybe. And the first family was like, the father was a very kind, sort of, what's the kind of person that feels very positive and understanding. Like anytime that we had an issue with maybe getting our breakfast buffet out late, or if there was like, they had missed making their beds or something, he was really cool about it and really nice. And in the course of conversation, after they'd been staying there like a week, I found out his family's whole house had burned down. Everything in it was gone. I had no idea they were going through anything like that, because all of them had such an upbeat, positive attitude. And then there was the other family that checked in that same day, and I had known immediately that they were going through something, because this woman made a huge scene at the front desk. She was bawling and upset that she wasn't going to get the room, especially where she wanted there to be a room, and was wailing about how their whole house had burned down. And this is one of those things where I was like, I was talking about it later. I think I was talking with my mother, and I was like, I feel really fucked up over it, because her whole home burned down, and I would be absolutely devastated. I would be crying and making a scene also. But I had so much less sympathy for the woman who was making a scene than I did for the family that I wasn't aware was going through shit until it came up in conversation. And unfortunately, I feel like that can be a real thing for people a lot of the time. If you draw attention yourself to what you're going through, other people feel weird about it, and they are less likely to be as sympathetic or giving of pity than they might be otherwise. So, and like I said, I know I look like an asshole in this, but I'm trying to be honest as I can about my reaction to the way these two people had both lost their homes, and they lost everything in them. They both had children. They were both staying in the same place. And yet one of them I just had a markedly different reaction to than the other. And I think that part of that is me with my baggage, where I don't feel comfortable asking for help a lot of the time. And it's just something that I've really tried to overcome and be okay with, and understand that doesn't mean that you're failing, and it doesn't mean you're looking for somebody to just give you things. I am willing to earn what I get, and I am willing to pay back favors. But Evie's whole thing here with constantly having a new set of grandparents that's dying or sick. She has a cat that she's always paying for, and then she announces to the whole office that she's cleaned out her savings, and so now she's going to be sleeping in the office. This is the kind of thing that it's played here everybody feels a lot of pity for her, but I do not believe in life this is at all how it would play out. Everybody would find her excruciatingly embarrassing. That's what I think would happen. And folks would be thinking that she was scamming them. They wouldn't believe her stories. There would be people in her office like trying to find her Facebook and seeing if any of this shit was even true. It's just like the culture that happens in offices. It's a very specific thing, and you could pull this off if you were a temp, but you couldn't, it could not be an ongoing thing that happened, week after week. You wouldn't be able to get that sort of reaction consistently. So I'm interested to see if Evie's around the next episode, because like she and Colin temporarily team up, and they have this whole thing with like hunting as a pair, eventually leading to this amazing, at first they're fighting each other for prey. And so they follow this guy into the bathroom, and they both chase him into the men's room and are trying to talk to him from, they're like climbing underneath the, Colin's going under the stall and noting that the dude doesn't use a seat cover and all of this stuff. And the guy is like, I feel really weak. And then he literally passes out because they're both feeding on him too much, which leads to a confrontation eventually. The confrontation was actually pretty fun. They're in the office after hours, and they each are trying to outdo the other on the frustration / pity thing. And as they bring out the big guns, they begin to like fly into the air. And it's a very sort of like Matrix-y scene that I honestly thought was really hilarious. And I love that his version of sort of being frustrating is sort of mansplaining, and arguing with her about everything that she says. And she comes back with these increasingly ridiculous responses. I have to read some of these like verbatim because they're just so good. Hulu is really frustrating to navigate, you guys. Whenever I pause and I go back to the Crowdcast page and then come back to Hulu, it gives me this like spinning thing for a minute before it brings the show back up. You should be careful because mauve attracts bees. I was wearing this skirt when my sister got her cancer diagnosis. Cancer isn't what usually kills you, it's the treatment. She was killed by a drunk driver. He was my fiancé. Violence often begins at home. Studies indicate I never had a home. Remind me to email you a link to a Slate article on the millennial housing crisis. I don't use email ever since my computer was hacked and my identity was stolen. Hackers featuring Johnny Lee Miller and Fisher Stevens is one of the few movies from 1995 that still holds up. I was held up at gunpoint while waiting in line to see that movie. They didn't take any money. They just did it for fun. Oh my God, you guys. I would love to know who wrote this like back and forth, because some of it, not all, feels so rooted in actual conversations people have had that they're just like, oh my God, I can't believe they're saying this shit to me right now. We're bringing this up again. So yeah, the two of them wind up like being paired off and hunting together for a little while. And they go to a restaurant and they like cause a scene in front of the waiter. At one point, the waiter says, do you guys want to eat your food? And they both say, we're feeding right now, in this incredibly creepy moment. But eventually, Colin says, I don't think that this is healthy. And he dumps her, and she does this whole like, oh my God, if you leave me, I'll kill myself. And he keeps on stopping and being like, oh, this is, we'll figure it out. It doesn't have to be like this. And then she'll like smile and he realizes that she didn't mean it, that she's just feeding a little bit. And as he walks away, she keeps doing it. No, wait, Colin, no. And then laughs. No, please come back. And then laughs. Oh my God. It's such a great, weird moment. I really enjoyed it. I feel like because he's dumping her, we won't see her again next episode, but I still really want her around. And I don't know. I just really enjoyed this. Yeah. But I don't think this is healthy. I kind of like wonder what he means about, I don't think this is healthy. Like, does he mean that they are each feeding on each other too much? Because she's definitely feeding on him some. We saw that. It's hard to say whether he's feeding on her, because I feel like it doesn't hit with him. Like, we don't see her react to him the same way, other than in that one scene. But yeah, I enjoy the idea of a different type of vampire. And I'm curious what else they're going to do with Colin. This whole thing is just, it's a smart move. It's very enjoyable. All right, so let's back up and talk about the werewolves. So they catch one, and he's just like in this trap in the front yard, and fully transformed, by the way. So it's very, if this had not been vampires who had caught him, he would have really blown the cover all the way. They eventually bring him inside and talk to him, and this is seen as, despite the fact that they sort of started the conflict by coming and peeing on their property, the fact that they laid a trap and that he got injured from it is seen as an act of aggression on their part. And it gets brought up that they can't just like, I'm going to read this bit, because they want to kill the werewolf, and Nandor says no, otherwise we endanger the sanctity of the truce. And I love when he talks about it. For tens upon tens of years, the vampire and werewolf communities live in a wary peace because of the truce. And vampire does not harm werewolf so long as werewolf doesn't interfere with any vampire shit. And because he is like, he's marked his territory, it means that it's going to attract his friends, and they're all going to show up at their house. So yeah, indeed, they do. Which, oh my God, he says, all of my werewolf brethren and sistren will find out about this, and they will not be happy. I don't know why that made me laugh so hard. I'll be honest, for all I know, sistren is a word. I don't think it is, but it was still it was so funny. I just love this so much. So he says, don't worry, I have incredible healing powers. And he stands up, and it really doesn't feel like he does have incredible healing powers. It's unclear. So I said this before, that I appreciated the fact that with the vampires, they'll say, oh yeah, we can definitely like hypnotize people. And that actually works. I thought maybe they might do the like, yeah, we can hypnotize people. And then it would be clear like they weren't very good at it, or it didn't actually like take the way they intended it to. But instead it does work. And I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of nice that it's like exactly, what they say it is. I think maybe I'm going to be getting a little bit more of the other thing with the werewolves, that they think they've got things, or they allege that they have certain powers that maybe they don't. So yeah, he stands up and says that he like has this healing factor, and then literally leaps out their closed window and collapses outside and just yells, my other leg. And they're just like, oh my God. And he says, I'm coming back with the pack, and by then I'll be 100% healed. Don't you worry about that. So he comes back, and oh my God, you guys. Laszlo has collected all of their silver bullets. They only have like 5, and they don't even have a gun. So it's not really going to do them a ton of good. And all of a sudden they can sense a bunch of them outside. And when they go out there, there are 2 werewolves that are just peeing against the wall of their front garden. And behind them is another one that's like peeing into the other garden. And then there is a woman who is squatting and peeing on one of the topiaries. I really enjoyed the addition of a woman peeing on one of the topiaries. There's just something extra hilarious about a woman marking her territory, because it involves being so much more vulnerable. You know, women, like, it's so much more annoying to pee when you're a woman, you guys. Dudes, you don't even know. You genuinely don't. If I could just stop having to pee, that would improve my life like 80% right out of the gate. But anyway, so, oh my God, I forgot that there's one up on the fence who's peeing on the top of their fence. So there's this one woman who keeps calling Nadja a Sense and Sensibility bitch, a Downton Abbey bitch. It's sort of a weird, like, insult, because Nadja does not speak in a British accent, and she isn't dressed in, like, the clothing from that era exactly, but it's fine. And this dude stops her, and he's like, Ange, what are you doing? Like, we have to build it up. You're ramping up way too quick. And she's like, well, what did you do? Just text us so that we could just come down here and like piss on everything? You're doing it again. You're undermining me. Oh my God, this whole thing. It just, yeah. Let's talk about this later. So they're in the midst of this like face off, and they back up and they start to like attack one another, flying through the air. Laszlo lands beautifully, but the werewolf lands right on the bunny topiary and like crushes it. Like, yeah. And that makes Laszlo really upset. And I love the werewolf being like, my sciatica. And as they're out there, all of a sudden there's this mist. And Nandor shows up. You can't be fighting with werewolves on the lawn. You'll alert the human neighbors, and there's a bus stop outside the house. I was so busy laughing at that the first time that I missed Laszlo saying, well, don't appear as a mist on the lawn then, you prick. You guys, this shit is so funny, I swear to God. I really do. I love this so much. And the whole thing with them, like, there's this feud, and for what? One of you came and peed on the just don't do that. It doesn't need to be like this. I am very curious what else is going to happen with the werewolves, if anything. And are we going to get other creatures turning up? Are we going to get, the trifecta? Usually, if you're dealing in supernatural stuff that's urban fantasy, you usually get vampires, werewolves, and witches. If something is long running enough, you usually get vampires, werewolves, witches, demons. And offshoot of that is occasional ghost. Not always, but occasional ghost. And I really wonder how many of those things we're going to get, because I would be pretty down for there to be a ghost, like, especially if they had a ghost that was like one of the victims that they ate in their home that was like began haunting their place. that would actually be really funny. Because especially if it was like maybe somebody who didn't completely comprehend what had even happened to them, or if it was somebody that they like began to regret killing because they turned out to be really cool and they were like, oh, I really wish you weren't dead, actually. Or they began to regret killing because now that person's around all the time and it turns out they're actually pretty annoying. And that person decides, you know, you killed me, so I think I'm actually going to make life very unfun for you. I feel like there's a lot of potential there. But anyway, so Nandor says we need to look... Oh my god, I forgot that Sean interrupts here. Everything's all right on the lawn, Sean, just like I like it, and I'm going inside. So Nandor says they have to follow the protocols. And they go inside, they have to find them, and it turns out that the deal is they each have to pick one fighter to represent their group. And this is when there's the whole discussion about what everyone's nationality is. And they decide that they're going to go with Nandor, which I just had forgotten that Nandor is supposed to be this amazing fighter. I would really... Look, we know that the guy who plays Nandor is actually super hot. I wouldn't mind seeing him actually fight. But I am aware that it probably wouldn't look the way I am thinking of if I were to get my druthers. So, what I'm saying is, if any of you guys know of a different show or movie in which the actor who plays Nandor gets in a fight with somebody, you please feel free to tell me, because I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of a tidbit on that. So anyway, yeah. I'm African American. Oh, okay, yeah. I'm Caribbean Canadian. Saskatoon, motherfucker. I do not know where that is. And then there's a dude who just says, I'm Caucasian. Yeah, that's right. That's Chad. And if anything, Chad looks more like a traditional vampire. He's got like the high collared shirt and coat and his hair slicked back. He has a much less conventional werewolf look. So anyway, this was written in 1993. Should a werewolf have a beef with a vampire house, the two groups shall not battle, but elect from amongst them their strongest fighter. The two fighters will face off in one-on-one combat on neutral ground. So where they wind up fighting is on the roof of an abandoned Circuit City in Staten Island, which is just amazing. Oh my god. You guys, this declaration is followed by the werewolves howling and the vampires hissing. And Guillermo tries to participate in the hissing, and Nandor has to tell him, no, not you, Guillermo. And I felt so bad for Guillermo. I really did. Every time. He's so pathetic. He really is. He's so sad. So we go to the roof, and this is... Part of me is so mad about it because it's in its way a really obvious joke, but I really did think this was super funny. So they get together in accordance with the protocols. They, of course, the vampires have chosen Nandor, and it turns out they have chosen Toby. And he is a pretty big dude, and he's not even at full size. Like, when he becomes a werewolf, he is enormous. And I love that when they, like, are intending to fight, they think that he's just going to be in his dude form. But it turns out that Toby only needs to imagine a full moon. He just needs to think about it, and that's enough to make him transform, because he has a hell of an imagination. And you guys, this is good shit. It really is. I love this so much. So when he transforms, it's such a weird, like, I have not seen, I can't think of, at least offhand, an example of a werewolf special effect that I found impressive. If you guys have one that you want to bring to mind, please feel free to share, because I always feel like they look really weird. And the worst one of all is definitely the one that Lupin turns into in Harry Potter. One of the worst animations of a werewolf I've ever seen. He looks practically reptilian, first of all. He doesn't even look like a wolf. So yeah, this dude begins to transform and his shirt starts ripping. And he just, like, has these tearaway pants that I remember everybody wearing when I was in fucking middle school. He looks like he's got hoofs almost. It's such a weird look. So anyway, they each get to choose their weapons. And Toby chooses teeth and claws. And Nandor chooses this stick. And he lifts the stick up. Oh my God. You guys, I hate this. I hate it. I'm so mad. Okay, I will choose this. Oh no. Oh no, Nandor. No, it's not a stick. It's a squeaky toy. And he throws it over the side of the building. And the fucking Toby leaps after it because he's like a dog, and he chases it and drops like 4 stories. He doesn't die. Evidently, he does not die. I don't know exactly if that's the healing powers or if that's just it wasn't quite high enough or what. But yeah, I love the head werewolf. Well, I guess this one goes to the vampires. And both Nandor and Laszlo, and actually I think all 3 of them, because Nadja as well, they all turn into bats and fly away, leaving Guillermo all alone to collect their shit and head home. And oh my God, it wasn't a squeaky toy. Is it? I thought it was. One of them stops Guillermo and says, "Hey man, do you think we could keep the bone?" And he says, "Yeah, that's okay." Oh, so it's a bone-shaped squeaky toy. That's what it is. And they all spread out. Let's find that son of a bitch. Mind where you're walking. If you hear a squeak, you may have stepped on the toy. You guys. The whole thing with this toy and them all, that is such a stupid joke. I'm so mad about it. I really am. I am always so impressed when a joke that's that obvious works that well. It's a combination of the performance itself, the way that each line is delivered, and how seriously it's taken. The way that he's like, "Do you think that we could keep that bone?" That is the tone of voice of somebody who genuinely wants to know if you will leave the remaining bottle of Jameson at their house. You know, I know it was for the party and that we didn't finish it, but like, do you think that we could hold on to that, man? Would that be cool? And there's something about the sincerity of it that makes it as funny as it is. So let's see, I'm trying to fast forward so that we can, because I already talked about everything that happens with Colin. Oh my God. It ends with Laszlo talking about getting back to his topiary. And these bushes won't trim themselves, as Beethoven used to say. But then again, he was always saying shit like that. And that is the end of the episode. I'm realizing that I've got about 10 minutes left. I feel like I must have skipped something because I have never had problems making it, talking about this show for an hour. Oh my God, I know what I forgot. You guys, I forgot to talk about Nadja giving us the tour of all of because Laszlo gives us the tour of the topiary, But she gives us the tour of these like stuffed animals, not stuffed, like taxidermied animals. That's the part that I forgot because God, that was good. Oh man. Okay. I gotta go back. Yeah. Okay. Here. And that's the scene where Nadja's theme is playing. Oh shit. I forgot about how cool the house looks. Because the house always like, it looks awesome, even in the day with its boarded up windows and stuff. But there's a shot at night where they're outside the house and you see this like bright green and red, it looks like a stained glass window. I think in reality, it might be a projector projecting this look onto a like actual plain wall. But for the intents of the show, it looks like a stained glass window. And then there's like red curtains over one side door. And then there's the full moon and the house looks awesome. And then when you go inside, this is mine and Laszlo's crypt. I decorated it myself. And it's all of these wooden and glass cases full of taxidermied animals. And one of them is an owl. This one is a very special creature to me. When I first met Laszlo, I was walking on the moors with him, and this owl flew over and scratched my head. And I said, "Kill that fucking bitch, please, Laszlo." We see for a moment what looks like a fox, and I think actually two different foxes. And then, if Laszlo and me ever had a child, I would like to imagine it would look like him. And she points to this armadillo and says, "Small and hard." So I had never lived anywhere that even had armadillos before I moved to Texas. And so evidently armadillos carry leprosy. I don't know. You know what? I'm going to look this up before I go and say this because this is something that that Owen told me. And yeah, carry leprosy. There it is. The bacteria that causes leprosy, a chronic disease that can lead to disfigurement and nerve damage, is known to be transmitted to humans from 9 banded armadillos. A new study reported that 62% of the armadillos in the western part of Pará state in the Brazilian Amazon are positive for the leprosy bacteria. So that's like a particular area. But is that like, what about the kinds that are here? I'm not seeing any, but anyway, so I think that armadillo are really cool. Like, I just think that they're a weird animal and they are so specific to a region that I have never lived in. And so they feel very novel to me, but Owen grew up knowing them as like these creepy animals that you shouldn't touch because they carry these diseases and they are often roadkill. And he just associates them with like grossness. And there was evidently this like popular convenience store that had an armadillo on the paper bag. Like it was part of their logo. And he said that he always hated going there because the image of an armadillo for him is almost like the same as a cockroach. And so he just hated having the bag with a picture of one on them. And I can't relate because I just think that they're so wild. And it makes me sad because they are roadkill a lot. I guess they don't move that fast. So when I take walks around here, I'll see dead armadillos all over the place that have been run over. And it's such a shame because since they have that hard shell, it's like a bug got squashed, you know? It's just awful. Kyle in the chat says, there are also armadillos in the original Dracula movie for a reason I can't remember. Oh, have I seen the original Dracula movie? I don't think I've seen it. Armadillos slap. The inclusion of armadillos was due to this is a quote apparently, I don't know from what. The inclusion of armadillos was due to the fact that armadillos had occasionally been seen digging in graveyards, which led to the mistaken belief that they would dig their way into coffins and eat the cadavers. Oh, that's from IMDb for the show, I'm assuming. Oh, okay. Thank you, Kyle. Well, that's wild. And then she's standing next to a mountain goat that has like the ram's horns that go back. And she just stands next to it and says, "I hate this goat." And that's all she says. And then there's a werewolf howling that gets her attention, and she goes outside. I don't know why, but her just standing there and saying, I hate this goat. That just got to me, you guys. Look, we all have an animal that we just don't like, but you picked this one for your decor in your bedroom, basically. Oh, it was the IMDb for Dracula, says Kyle. Okay. Now, Kyle, help me out. When is the original Dracula movie? Like, when was that made? What year? Because Owen and I recently watched the one with Gary Oldman. And by recently, I mean like a couple of months ago. And I can't get over that movie, you guys, still. I understand what they were attempting to do. I even have people who genuinely like it because they're like, it was meant to be sort of stylized. And I get it. And I wish that I could set aside my feelings on some things in order to just enjoy it. But, oh man, that movie was bonkers. And I mean, I recommend it, honestly, because it's certainly an experience, but I recommend watching it with somebody and while you're drunk, maybe a little bit stoned, because it's so bizarre that you really do need to let yourself relax into it. Just let it happen to you, because it's a really weird one. Kyle says 1931. Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. I didn't realize it was that old. Yeah, maybe I should watch that. I wonder if watching that would give me some insight into the Gary Oldman one, which I can't remember what the name of that one was. But the Gary Oldman one, and it also has Winona Ryder in it. It's so incredibly, like, what's the word I want? Melodramatic. And I don't feel like I have ever seen another movie that leaned on melodrama the way that movie did. And, if you're going to do melodrama, I guess Dracula's the story to do it with, because the story is genuinely, the original book is so silly in so many ways that you kind of have to go that direction with it. But I never read the original, so I'm wondering if there are references in the show to the book that I have missed. If anybody out there is listening who has read it and you've caught some stuff that were book references, please feel free to point them out to me if I've missed them, because I do find that sort of thing interesting. I have always been sort of on the fence as to whether I want to bother reading Dracula, or a lot of, like, I've read Frankenstein, for example, and I fucking hated it. I really did. And it's not like I don't respect Mary Shelley. I mean, I get that what she did was like a groundbreaking achievement at the time, but Frankenstein just felt like such an exercise in like, oh, humanity is terrible and they don't like people who are different, and then you die. And it just felt really like futile to me and sad. I kind of worry that I'll have a similar irritation if I read Dracula, especially since Dracula, I think, is longer and a little bit more meandering than Frankenstein even was. But I could be wrong about that. And I'm more familiar with the overall Dracula story. So I think reading it might be a little bit more boring, because Frankenstein I read before I had ever seen any like movies or many references other than it's alive, which isn't even accurate to the book anyway. So it still felt like a fairly new story to me. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd be able to make it through Dracula. Maybe I could find it on audiobook. It might be kind of fun around Halloween or something. Joanne says, Frankenstein is a better film than Dracula. Sorry, Bella. Sorry, Bella. Who's oh, wait. Bela Lugosi, right? Is that who played Dracula? Right. Okay. I get it. See? I remember things, even if I haven't seen it. I don't remember things that well, though. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to wrap this one up. But thank you again to all of you for coming and hanging out with me and helping me out in the chat, Kyle. I appreciate you feeding me names and information. Thank you to Stephanie for commissioning this episode. And I will be seeing you guys again in, a month, 2 months, June 1st. It's going to be a minute. I will see you June 1st with the next episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.